So one of the interesting things about jumping from the Eiffel Tower, it was so successful from a commercial viewpoint, especially with the media and how it inspired lots of people. It got us thinking about other monuments around the world and what would be an interesting thing to jump from. And so the great one that really inspired us was the Statue of Liberty in New York. And what was interesting about that, there was a lot of synergy between the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty, and that was Gustav Eiffel that designed it, or at least did the structural engineering piece, and it was a gift from the people of France to America many years ago. And it's, you know, obviously the Statue of Liberty is all about, you know, opening up American freedom of speech and all that sort of stuff. And so we had this idea of jumping from it from the most pure sense you could possibly do, which meant jumping from the torch. So the statue has this little torch, and if you're an authorised person, you can climb up the stairs in the statue, and there's a final set of stairs that goes up the arm into the torch, and there's just one padlock up there. And so there was an easy way, and that was we just climb up the statue with the tourists, cut the padlock, close the door once we're out there, and set up our stuff and jump in broad daylight. And I said, no, we've never damaged anything we've jumped from, and we're not about to do that just to get a bit of publicity. So I came up with this elaborate scheme, which was to first of all sort out all the security around the island, Staten Island. So we spent some time looking at that, and then I flew on to Paris, where I was living at the time, found a building site where they had a tower crane, and early in the morning I'd go out there and we'd climb the tower crane, and I'd jump off the tower crane over the construction site, which was just bits of steel and Rio. It was a very ugly, sort of dangerous thing, but the concept was to do an elevator jump, which was dropping feet first, attached to my arm, but through a harness underneath a tuxedo. And so we got the height sussed out, because with the Statue of Liberty, there's a stone base and a copper statue. So what we did is eventually put the team together, flew into New York, and bought ourselves an Indian canoe, paddled out across the harbour one night after we'd set up our lines on the tower, because the concept was to free climb the outside of the tower. Now the only way to do that is you had to put climbing ropes in and climb up the ropes, so it's called prussicking. So I used to train out of our little apartment in Paris, and I got very quick at climbing ropes. And so the idea was put fishing lines over the base. Then I made up a key for the head of the tower, so you could open one of the windows and throw a fishing line out the window, one over one shoulder, one over the other, or actually the same line doing a loop. And the idea was to connect a rope to the end of the fishing lines, pull the rope over, secure it at the bottom, then climb the line and repeat the process up to the shoulder. And then the problem was, how do you get from the shoulder to the torch? So I figured out a crossbow was the idea. So had a crossbow with a fishing line on it. And the idea was to fire the crossbow over the top of the torch, and this arrow would drop down. The boys would then connect up the rope to the end of that, or vice versa, sorry, I'd connect up the rope to my end and they'd pull it down. Then all I had to do was climb up the rope to the torch, secure the little doorway into the torch at the top, and drop off the side. So anyway, we got the tower all set up. There was probably about 8 of us, and what we'd do is the last stairwell going up to the head of the tower is a one-way stair. And so we had a bunch of people that you'd start and stop as you walked up these stairs, and so we'd just block the stairs. So people would stop, then we'd block the cameras in the inside of the head, the security cameras, open up the window, and I didn't realise it was so windy up there, and I couldn't throw the weight over the shoulder, so I ended up dropping them down the front of the tower. So the next morning we paddled out there at about 5 o'clock in the morning, or even a bit earlier, might have been 4 in the morning. Got the canoe in, hid it under a wharf, got onto the land and climbed up the outside wall of the tower, which is about a 7-metre wall before you get to the base of the statue. We had a couple of problems there with getting the equipment over that wall, and a couple of the guys couldn't press it particularly well. So we were starting to run out of time, got to the base of the statue, and I'd miscalculated, and there was a piece of stone on like a 45-degree angle, which was just a little bit too far for me. And not being very tall, I couldn't take the risk of trying to free climb that, because if I took a fall, I'd do a little bit of damage, and I didn't really want to do that. And we'd already run out of time, and I knew there was a twist in the fishing line going up the copper part of the tower. So we decided to abort the mission that night and repeat it the next day. So off the tower we went, off the island, jumped into our canoe, paddled out to a boat that was waiting for us, and went back to New York. First thing in the morning, we came back on the first ferry, took our fishing lines off the tower, and went back to have a sleep. Came back again that afternoon and got it rigged up absolutely perfectly, slightly longer lines, heavier weights. I managed to throw it over the shoulder of the tower properly. And so we repeated actually that evening, as we're throwing the weight out of the window over the shoulder, there was a tourist at the bottom that saw my arm going out the window and notified a security guard, and I could see it all happening as I was looking out the window. And the security guard realised obviously something's amiss here, so they were on the radios, and I knew we'd been busted. So we packed up all of our gear, secured the windows, but everything was done as far as the initial rigging went, and climbed back down the copper part of the tower to be greeted by 3 big American security guards with their guns out, and we were arrested, arms up against the wall, and they said, okay, you're either tourists or you're here to do a parachute jump off this tower, because an Aussie guy apparently had done one a few months before, just through chopping the padlock and jumping off, you know. So I said, oh, no, I'm here to do a parachute jump. And anyway, they arrested us, took us back to the security centre on the island, delayed the ferry for about an hour, and I think we paid about a $50 fine each for trespassing or something of that nature, and they let us go. And so as we were sailing off the island, we looked back and said, look, it's now perfectly set up. What are we going to do? Should we come back in the morning and jump it? You know, so we put a phone call through to a local lawyer and said, okay, look, what's the risk? And he said, well, look, because you've already been caught, if you do this and you get caught again, you risk $5,000 fine and a few months in a Manhattan jail. And I thought, I'm sort of comfortable about the fine, but I'm not sure about the jail bit. Anyway, we had to put it to a vote, and we were completely exhausted because we'd had very little sleep over the last week trying to get this thing to happen. And there was one person said yes, one person said no, so I had the final vote. So we decided to abort the mission completely. And so unfortunately it's still sitting there waiting to be jumped. But since 9/11, I don't think the risk is all that interesting. It would have to be by permission.